Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We've got the Not Investment Advice NIA boys here. Trung Phan, Meme Master Flex himself, writing for Bloomberg. And then we've also got our boy Jack Butcher, founder of Visualize Value. And I'm Bilal Zaidi, as always. Boys, it's been a big week for us. It was a big moment for NIA. We had our boy Michael Saylor on the pod last week. There's no other place to start. How was it for you guys?
Right. Took us only 66 episodes to get Michael Saylor on the podcast. That is a metric that if you'd have told me on day one of NIA, I would not have believed you. So from that perspective, it's an absolute resounding success. Incredible success. Most watched episode by what multiple? 3-4 times, maybe more than that?
I guess so. Yeah, because there's YouTube, which has obviously popped off more than normal. Then the audio side is pretty good as well. Yeah,
well, thank you to every new listener, right?
We have to give
because
credit.
Of Saylor.
Yeah, thank you to the new listeners. And what we discover from Bilal's analytics is a lot of people wake up every morning and search Michael Saylor.
It is kind of crazy the amount of comments we got. People like, I wake up and I search for Saylor videos. And I'm like, yeah, I respect that, man. If you got to do, some people do David Goggins. I used to do a little
brand.
That's it, man. He knows what he's doing. But yeah, was there anything else? I mean, we've had a chance to listen to it several times by this point. We've had comments from people. Were there things that you would do differently? Were there things that you're like, oh, actually, I thought about what he said and it makes more sense now, like the sugar cube Tesla, nuclear Tesla, whatever it was? Yeah, curious what you guys thought overall on that side.
Something that we've talked about in the past within our group chats and on the podcast is if you take anything he says out of context, it may be the most ridiculous thing you ever heard in your life.
Yeah.
Like a sugar cube, a fusion reactor powered by a sugar cube for 100 years. Insane, if you think about it objectively. But then if you listen for the next 3 minutes, it makes all the sense in the world. Because he's like, what I'm trying to say is, he's giving the most absurd example just to illustrate the fact that to him, you can agree with it or you can disagree with it. And we saw in the comments, a lot of people was all over their head, understandably. Half the chat was over my head. But his point was that Bitcoin, to him, is the equivalent of base 10 math or a Newton's calculus, as in he created the foundation to build stuff on top. So you're not going to get a better foundation that you can quibble around the edges, but it's like, why? I actually really took to that part of his explanation. He's like, why would you want something better than calculus? Like, well, it's already working. We're launching rockets. We're making nuclear reactors. It's like, now you're just quibbling at the sides, right? So academics do. As we know, Michael Saylor is not an academic. He's in the real world, building.
Yeah, fair enough. He's just about in the real one, mate. Bloody hell. I will say the only thing, based on what you just said there, I did think there were quite a lot of false equivalencies, and that, like, to paint a picture for people, we don't have to go into every single one here, but like, first of all, I think he's great. Like, I like him overall. He's hilarious. Like, the stuff he says, I respect him a lot, right? But I would say I probably don't agree with like more than 50% of stuff he says. Like, during the pandemic, when we were listening and like everyone's on this bull market run trying to get their heads around what the new kind of meme and idea of Bitcoin was, the narrative of like digital gold, I thought he did a better job than pretty much anyone in that time. And that's why we talked about him since episode 0, right? But over time, the more I've listened, I've kind of been like, okay, this is really cool and interesting. He's got a great way of communicating, but at the same time, like, I didn't ever think it was really that objective. And, you know, that's going to become really boring talking about it too long. But that's kind of like how I thought about it for a while. And then just to paint a picture for people, like, we had an hour booked with him, right? Like, we could ask him 3 questions and he could go for the whole time if we wanted. So like, we were also trying to be respectful, like not interrupt him every 2 minutes, but also like try to challenge him where it made sense. So I feel overall I'm like very happy with it, and I thought it was a really good chat. There are a couple of things I wrote here. Oh yeah, the kind of summary for me was like the idea of like maximalism. And this is something Balaji talked a lot about on his recent episode with Tim Ferriss. And whether that's, you know, Bitcoin maximalism or any other maximalism, I can't say that word very well, but there's just there's a good and bad to it. And I think there's that kind of ideology is what he called it. I actually got a quote here. He said, Bitcoin maxis are, Sorry, give me 1 second. Bitcoin maximalism is the most important ideology in the world that people don't know about. And that is like, and there's a lot more context around that, but he's basically talking about, he's not even saying it's good or bad. He's just saying there's this underlying thing that in his view is going to take over the world in terms of 5-10 years from now. There's going to be, you know, a lot more things running distributed, a digital currency ecosystem that is running outside of the traditional world. And Bitcoin maxis specifically are the most devout, right? Like they are like almost religious in a way, in the way that, and we've talked about this before, and in a way that makes it a lot stronger, because if you think about the history of time, like if you look at monotheist religions, I was talking to my friend about this last night, like, you know, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, like one God, one focus. There's 10 commandments, like there's like one huge focus, and everything else there's less gray. And that allows you to convert people in so many words in a much better way. When there's a lot more gray, it's like, oh, do we do proof of stake or proof of work? And do we do this DeFi project, but then 5 of them are rug people? You know, there's a lot more things that can break. So in that way, I think they've got, like, definitely not a maxi in any way, but I think that is quite an interesting idea. But yeah, I know some of you two listen to the pod as well, but was there anything else on Saylor before we talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking back at, I think we got him to say some new things, and I'm not waking up and searching his name on YouTube every day, so maybe I'm not accurate in making that statement. But I think some of the frames that we teed up, like, got him to talk about things in a slightly different way, even like admitting the value of some of the things that are being built outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem, but are inherently unethical because they're not being built on Bitcoin, which, again, like, we probably, I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing that we don't have someone that's supremely technical on this podcast to kind of get into the nuances. But as far as my understanding goes, like, the infrastructure of Bitcoin has its limitations. Like, it does not operate in a way that allows it to, like, run custom computation. So all of these things are, I don't know. I guess I struggle with the gap between where we are and where we're going without all of the things that are being developed outside of the ecosystem. Like, it's kind of like, I guess the analogy that comes to my mind is like a conglomerate or a large corporation that, but like a Google, basically, like, sees this great innovation happen in a like area not too dissimilar from where they operate, and they're like, we're going to buy that. Apple, right? 1Password, we're going to buy that and integrate it. And there's been all this amazing and interesting development around the ecosystem, whether it's unethical or whatever. People recognize the value in it, but the time it takes to get it into that ecosystem is either 10 times longer, 100 times longer, or just nobody does it. So that was the question that I was like wanting to get an answer to. And you really, like, it devolves to like, well, unethical people are trying to make a quick buck elsewhere. And I think the other like overarching point that I think someone actually mentioned this in a YouTube comment, is like, people don't really understand his frame because he's not operating from the same economic perspective as 99.99999% of people.
He's post-economic, right?
Yeah, he's a billionaire. He's got yacht here, house there, this, that. Like, you can pontificate about whatever you want at that level. And I think some of the assumptions, this is true of everybody, right? Like, if you're in a different situation than somebody, like, the empathy gap between you and the person you're talking to just gets wider and wider and wider based on how much of an outlier you are. And he's most certainly an outlier. So I think he talks about it from the perspective of like, if the Bitcoin standard was in operation tomorrow, this is how I see the world operating. And you know, that it's always fascinating to listen to somebody that has that level of, you know, vision to like envision a world that operates so differently than the one we live in today. But yeah, just some of the short-term questions, I think that's where the maximalist ideology is getting challenged the most, because it's like, okay, if this is true, then why hasn't it been done or built or accomplished? And the other thing, I think we'll get into this later, is like just the spending ideology and the when does this become a currency that you spend versus the we've talked about this in loads of different contexts. It's like, it's really hard to change the direction of a thing after it's gotten its like velocity. Like the way a community of people behaves is a thing until that behavior is no longer recognized by the larger group. Like the tribe either like expands exponentially or it eventually dies. So I think just thinking about Bitcoin as all the things we talk about as a meme, it's like, does it have the narrative power to like continue to grow? And I think everybody admits that is being held up by real world applications, use cases, onboarding, all of this stuff. And if the onboarding is, hey, put your money in here and wait 100 years to spend it, I think that is like not helpful to grow in the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, that's fair. The other thing I was going to pull out from Balaji's chat with Tim Ferriss, and we'd love to get him on obviously at some point. He'd be an amazing guest to have. But one of the things he says are maximalists are in it for fundamentally political, moral, social, or ethical things. And he also says, I still recognize this zeal. Zeal really, really matters. Zeal matters because zeal is the difference between selling when it's low, and zeal is the difference between selling never. So it was a transcript and it wasn't really nice to read out. But yeah, essentially saying the difference between selling when something is low, like a lot of people might have done in the last 6 months, versus I believe in this thing forever. Like this is happening in the same way someone might believe in heaven and hell, and that keeps them on the right path. You know, like that to me is also quite a powerful thing for a community of people. I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. But I think that is interesting in one way. But then on the other side, if you think about changing people's minds over time through narrative is obviously a big part of that. But also, like you said, it's the use cases and people actually using things. If it's ever going to be something that is worth more than just this thing's going to be worth more in the future than it is today, therefore you should buy it, then it needs to have those real use cases, which we obviously did challenge on the pod and talk about Ethereum, DeFi, NFTs, other stuff, which are very complicated things, but have actually shown, I mean, we talked, half of the thing he was talking about was stablecoins. Stablecoins have been built on Ethereum as well. So,
he gave use cases. He gave 5. Yeah. He said digital property, stablecoin, tokens. You can include NFTs in there, peer-to-peer, instant peer-to-peer transfers, and then 365, 24/7 trading. He said those are all 5 good use cases. Yeah. He says he never said it straight, but he just said he just anticipates all of them will migrate to Bitcoin, right? And it kind of goes to what you brought up, Bilal. And again, I cannot, for the NIA listeners and longtime listeners, we were laughing so hard at Walter Bilal Cronkite here, not letting Saylor just skate through it, challenging. I mean, people commented in the telegrams, like, Bilal kept that thing going. It's like, I'll give you my frame when Bilal said at the very beginning, how would you do differently? My mindset going in, and we tried about it, is like, we knew this guy was going to cook. If you have the chef in the kitchen, you let him cook, right? And all you can do is tee him up and let him cook. And we knew this. We could have asked one question, he could have talked for 90 minutes. Bilal more than myself or Jack for sure. It's like Bilal's like, we need to get more in. Like if you rewatch it, there are parts of Bilal, you can see Bilal's like inching in, you know, like when you're trying to like slowly cut someone off, but like very respectfully. But back to the Ethereum question and, you know, different use cases. Somebody in the comments, I believe it was in YouTube comments, made a very good point. So the entire premise that we reached out to Saylor and how it started was from that video from 2012 that started the podcast, where he was explaining, if you know enough about something but you're not an expert, you can hurt yourself, which I still think is just an incredible piece of wisdom. And but somebody in the comments wrote, has he spent 10,000 on Ethereum to opine on it? Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, but it could be the case that he's looking at it purely from is this a decentralized crypto protocol, right? Because that's how he's attacking it. He's like, it's not decentralized and it should be a security. But then I guess the question that the commenters like, well, has he tried to play with it? Has he tried to see how the community is on
MetaMask flipping NFTs? Can you imagine?
I don't know I don't know the answer to that, but I thought that was an interesting comment. The last thing I'll say was, I am very happy that he actually, it was a little bit of a long lead up, but he applied the know enough to hurt yourself to the crypto community, and it just made me, that was like, I was hoping for him to do that. But when he said, listen, there are computer scientists that have been in this game for 10 years that don't understand what I'm saying. And I'm like, okay, so he's clearly thought about this for thousands of hours, right? We know this. He's talked about it for thousands of hours. And that for him to say and look at the community and be like, I think that this not knowing enough to hurt yourself applies to a lot of the community. Fair enough. A lot of people may disagree with that, but I was trying to tease that out without asking directly.
I do agree that that's a great line of wisdom, right? Like, and that's a good reminder for all of us, like stuff we don't actually know about, like don't try to pretend to be an expert. At the same time, when you're having a debate with someone, we weren't actually having a debate, we're just having a conversation. If he was debating, let's say Vitalik or someone like that, if your argument was, well, you just don't understand what I'm saying enough, you haven't spent the time, and that to me is a bit of a weak argument. It's a little bit like it's kind of what you say when you don't have anything else to fall back on.
It's like what you do in high school, right? It's like, listen, I read the books, guy. Or it's like the teacher move, right? Hey, I'm the teacher.
Yeah,
I don't have to argue about this. Okay.
Well, and especially when you use the word moral, like again, I'm not saying he had very valid points on some of those things about criticism of ETH, and I would actually agree with going back in time. Like I think some of those things they did were potentially unethical. You could make the argument either way, but I think there was another thing that Balaji said which stuck with me, and I can't remember the exact phrase, but he said something along the lines of, there's a funny contradiction in a group of people whose ideology is about like kind of anti-government in a way, like let's be a party away from the government, like we have our own money, we don't need fiat currency. But then on the flip side, you're saying Ethereum is not FDIC insured or whatever the phrase he used. There was something else he talked about, unregistered security, he said, or something like that. And it's kind of like the whole ethos of this world is about breaking away from the status quo. And like, again, it kind of comes back to this circular argument, which I think you can poke holes in for sure. And given the time we had, we weren't there for 3 hours. We weren't having a heated debate. We were just trying to have a good conversation. Given that, I'm like very happy with the way it ended up. It looks like most people really liked it as well. All right, boys, anything else on that? That was really interesting. I think we could talk for an hour about this, but Jack, looks like you're thinking about something, mate.
Yeah, like I was just going to agree with your last statement. Like you could go into all the nuance of it, and it's hard. Like he's done 15-hour recordings on this subject by himself, so we're not going to get to the bottom of it. But it was amazing to have made that happen, man. Testament to the power of the internet, mate.
Yeah, mate.
Very good.
Definitely. No, appreciate it. Yeah, I will say one thing. When Jack sent this in our chat, he said it only took us 66 episodes to get Saylor, and like the reason I would just say this is all three of us like have built stuff on the internet and like done stuff, right? Like that is one of the main reasons I love working with you guys, because it's like this assumption that it's going to take 1,000. Like you're like, oh, we're doing thousands of reps of this. Like this is a long-term thing, and like to me, I'm like 66. I'm like, yo, when I started Create Lab, I was trying to go for the jugular, like straight away, trying to get all these big names.
Yo, and Elon, what's poppin', bro?
Yeah, exactly. But no, definitely, I mean, a big moment for us three together, and for honestly, like the day one NIA fans who've been like following us.
I know there are a lot of listeners that message us. We appreciate that. Let me leave them with one piece of wisdom. If you think you can do more than one thing in life, you're wrong. You can't. Because as soon as you find success in one thing and you go start looking at something else, somebody smarter than you with less to lose and more to gain, they're working 100 hours a week.
That's true.
Dude,
the way he ended it was good. Man. That part was good.
Bro, I listened to that before I go for a run. For the people that's completely over their head, that was Michael Saylor's advice.
You don't have time to run, Trung.
Yeah. That was Michael Saylor's advice for newly grads, is I focus on one thing. Because you have 100 opinions, but the world only wants to hear one. You can do 100 things, but the world only wants to pay you for one.
What was it? It was something about energy, dissipating energy.
Yeah. I mean, that was. I'm glad you got that question in Trunks. Like his point of view on that is so good.
He said
so good, and he's a living example of it.
Well, except for the fact that he ditched MicroStrategy.
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean? At a time.
He found a new vehicle to put that energy in, right? Well, he talks about he saw that MicroStrategy had kind of hit its plateau as a business, but Yeah,
that he had to
last
reinvent
quote,
and find a new one. Go on,
final
Tron.
quote on it is that Bilal, you brought it up, but he said about energy is that the problem with the world is dissipating energy. What's the solution? Stop dissipating energy.
That is wise words. Yeah, but anyway, thanks for Saylor, Michael Saylor. If you listen to this, thanks for coming on, mate. We really appreciate it, and that was a big moment for us. Talking of Saylor, there's a lot of people that have been saying the Not Investment Advice podcast episode with Michael Saylor was the bottom of the market. Definitely not investment advice. But boys, the last week we've talked about betting versus building. I'm definitely still on the building train, but I'm not gonna lie. In the last week, when I saw that green, that beautiful green, it's like that meme, like the tiny little green. Was
exactly.
all
I was gonna
over
say, look at a 1 year chart, mate, and that was reset. Yeah,
well, you gotta look at a 5 year chart, and you.
Yo,
you
listeners, you gotta say
perspective.
Bilal actually messaged us. He's like, hey, I got some bids on my toads again.
Because Jack said something. There was the immoral pump of ETH going, and I was like, yeah, I know it's back when I'm getting a bid on my toad. But yeah, I will say, so again, all jokes aside, there was news about the ETH merge has been, I think, announced for September, which is a few months away. I don't know enough about this, but yeah, essentially the transition from proof of work to proof of stake, the immoral one, which we talked about in the last episode. I definitely don't think it's immoral, but yeah,
What's the staking schedule, Bilal? What's the staking schedule?
No one knows. That's the thing. We're gonna have so many inside jokes forever now, just based on that one episode. But yeah, Jack, you said you might have a theory on something about the merge.
Yeah, I think it was this, maybe the post Saylor reflection is a good time to bring this up. I'll try and be brief about it as well. Like, a friend of mine has got this meme where he talks about, like, people think Bitcoin is valuable for its asset design. And they got the Goodfellas laughing table, you know, like dudes all just like cracking up. And in some ways that is true, right? It's like the asset design and the way you can talk about it and the way you can frame it up in the context of all the other ways the world works. That story makes it valuable and makes people trust in that thing, right? So if you think about, you can build an amazing argument around that. And then the way I think about the idea of Ethereum becoming this thing that can drop its energy expenditure by 99.9%, regardless of the ethical or religious implications of that from whatever perspective you sit from, in the environment and the world we live in today, like, which one of those memes has a better shot of getting traction as the future of money?
Yeah.
The one energy-wise, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah. And also, just one minor thing I want to bring up, that he talked about how it was immoral. Sorry, I just want to let this one out. It was immoral to kill the ETH mining industry that support it and all this stuff. And I, again, without knowing all the details, that to me, again, is like, like if there's a horse and carriage industry, you're not going to say it's immoral to build a car that was better than the horse and carriage industry. So anyway, that was also a similar kind of argument that I feel like we were kind of going in circles there. But yeah, so Jack, you're saying in terms of the viability of the meme to spread into a wider narrative for the wider world to adopt, you're saying that kind of ESG or whatever side is important.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know, maybe I'm not sophisticated enough, but the idea that, like, you know, when you use the physics analogy where it's like, this is inevitable because it's physics. Like, if I throw my computer screen out of the window right now, it's going to hit the lawn, right? If I, like, walk down the street and say, hey, everybody, what's your favorite money? They're not going to say the same thing. Well, they are. They're all going to say the green, the Benjamins.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for any currency to succeed, it is about human consensus, right? And there are definitely amazing arguments that you can make about getting people to believe in things and adopt things and spend things. And I think there is an inertia and an inevitability to those memes at a certain point. The more, I don't disagree with any of this stuff Michael Saylor said about, you know, the monetary policy can switch to this, to that. And it's like, yeah, that's true of some very, very, very successful monetary systems in human history, arguably like the thing that they all have in common, the thing that we've been able to adopt. whether you think that's right or wrong. I'm just talking purely from the perspective of like which story is more believable, therefore which one gets the most adoption, which one do people accept with the least resistance. And maybe I'm saying maybe that's not the right way to think about it. But when I think about like all of the mainstream attacks at a currency, like some of the political and social hot topics of our time, what is supposed to happen with Ethereum is addressing those things in a positive way, you know, energy being the biggest one. And obviously, like the stablecoin thing was interesting to me when you started talking about stablecoins. Again, the non-technical perspective, it's like, what is a Bitcoin stablecoin? Because a stablecoin is like a programmatic asset, right? Like a stablecoin is, I'm not sure how that has a technical relationship to Bitcoin. And somebody in the comments, please educate me. I don't understand. Yeah,
so good. I wonder if I
want the only thing ERC20 token like an Ethereum, right? Where it's
I guess he was saying when they build the layer 2s or that there is like Lightning or whatever, maybe there's already stable coins on Lightning. I have no idea, but like you could get
not Bitcoin.
Like that's point. True. Yeah, that's true. And
like
I wonder
an ERC20 token built on Ethereum, USD, USDC, USDT, whatever. Some of the experiments will fail, but the technology that Ethereum, the Ethereum technology is what makes that possible. And I'm struggling to what degree of technical integration does there need to be for someone to consider there's a Bitcoin stablecoin. So anybody listen to this who doesn't like what we just said, please educate us in the comments.
Comment in the YouTube below and let us know, because
what is the criteria to fulfill for a Bitcoin stablecoin? And please explain it in good detail. Thank you very much.
That's a good question.
Jack Dorsey, let us know, Jack. I know you're working on this at Block. I know Jack Dorsey's working on this.
I'm sure this is required listening at all the top Bitcoin development firms in the world. Yeah.
Exactly.
Quick, so let me rebut. Let me put on my Michael Saylor hat. Well, I have a Miami Heat hat, so Miami, Michael Saylor, there you go. I think his rebuttal from his 15-hour What is Money lecture is that all the currencies that you mentioned, and again, you weren't defending them. You're saying what can drive the meme cycle fastest for adoption, right? I think his rebuttal would be they've all collapsed. All of them have collapsed. Every one of these fiat currencies that we've talked about are ones that have kind of driven by via getting enough people to believe in it. They've all collapsed because humans just end up printing too much of it, right? Every civilization is the same, which is broadly true. So we'll see with the U.S. dollar, but I hope the U.S. dollar still keeps kicking because I'm paid in USD.
Yeah, I think you've got a little time, boys. Don't not investment advice, but I think you'll be all right for a bit. Yeah.
The famous last words. Famous.
Well, the other thing is Venezuela. The other thing is like the issuance schedule and the monetary policy and like, man, the questions around that are all incredibly valid. I think that's like, again, from the perspective of somebody that's done 10,000 hours of research, that's a valid question. The only question somebody that hasn't, and the expectation that everybody's going to do 10,000 hours of research about money, we have proven over however many thousand years of human civilization that people are not interested in doing that research, even having lived through currency collapse, failed empires. It is not common knowledge in the same way that throwing something out of the window, it's going to break, is common knowledge. So I don't know, maybe there needs to be an event of a significant enough catastrophic level where this is like human instinct, monetary policy and understanding the nuance of monetary policy becomes something that's incredibly important, something that everybody learns. My instinct is that's not going to be the case because, I don't know, maybe there's just there's like a really strong cognitive dissonance for a lot of people to even think about money. And that comes from the perspective where you have more than you need is where you can like pontificate about how everything works. So,
but have you guys seen those viral TikToks or Instagram reels or whatever, where they'll go up to people on the street and be like, "I'll give you one Bitcoin or $100," and then like,
Right.
I mean, obviously it's the editing as well, but
yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
they're like, "A Bitcoin? Who wants a Bitcoin?" And then they're like, "Oh, I'll take $100, thank you." And then they're like, "You sure? Bitcoin's worth $20,000 or 40,000 at the time." And they're like, "No, I don't really believe in all that." And it's like, you know, that's the sort of thing where literally it's one of those prank channels where they were going to give you a Bitcoin. Like, it's like
the majority of the world thinks that way, right? It's something to think about, which is why, back to Jack's point about the adoptability of something, like what creates the stronger meme. And if you're just, and Bilal touched on with Balaji, if you're just maxing around, yelling at people that don't get it, and if you're, it's just not going to work. But I hope they get around to it, because we also hold on to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I will say, go on.
I was just going to say the other thing, that a lot of this stuff, we've talked about this, Bilal, in like 5 hours of Creator Lab, is like, this stuff is like, it's good to know, it's good to think about, but it's also like, it really misses, or it allows you to like pass over the entire idea of why we need money in the first place, like the exchange of goods and services, and like the incentive system that exists below money. And it's also like an interesting place to hide when I think that's why it's appealing to so many people too. Is like people feel like they've gotten a raw deal, and in many cases people have, right? There's a lot of 10,000 charts you can point to that talks about purchasing power and devaluation of currency and blah blah. But it's also like, there are lots of things that have to happen outside of this monetary system for you to flourish as a person, as a family, as a nation, as a this and that. And there's just a lot more nuance to it than like sell your house and buy Bitcoin and everything's going to be fine, you know?
Yeah, definitely. All right, boys, I think we can move on to the next topic here, just to keep us on track. I'm going to do a quick mini meme of the week. It's kind of a meme. Everything's a meme. So it's going to tie us into the next part of the show. Can you guys see that? This is a t-shirt. I definitely need one of these. It is a t-shirt that says 3 Arrows Capital Risk Management Department 2022. Boys, what has been going on? There's been some leaked docs apparently, and for people who don't know, well, let's explain what's been going on.
I have the thread up from Jack Nywald. We'll put it in the show notes. So there's been a lot of effery in the crypto space, as we all well know. A couple bankruptcies in crypto banks, Celsius, Voyager, which is publicly listed in Canada. I actually know a couple guys that funded that. 3 Arrows Capital is a hedge fund. According to Jack, it once had 10 billion of assets under management. The founders, as some people may have seen, have gone off the grid. And here is the headline. Founders used some of the money they borrowed for their hedge fund to buy a yacht before they paid off creditors. So this all came out from leaked documents, a 1,000-page leaked document. And the founders were Suju and Kyle Davies. You've probably seen them on Twitter if you're deep in cryptosphere. They're quite active. So I'd like to talk about this in 2 parts. Talk about what they were involved in, and a more macro 50,000-foot thing that we could talk about how DeFi, we swapped messages around, has kind of quote unquote survived, this latest sequence of these blowups. And it's kind of getting a bad rap in the sense this wasn't necessarily a crypto specific issue of a $10 billion hedge fund basically taking money, investing it poorly, and then disappearing. It's like just financial shenanigans, right? But there is a sheen of the crypto opacity and the fact that there's no regulation around any of it. So, let me throw it out here. What have you, outside from the 10 billion that this fund once had and the 3 billion that they owe creditors, they owe 20 creditors, including Genesis is the largest creditor, which is the people that run GBTC, the Bitcoin Trust. So that Genesis gave 2.8 billion to these guys, and it looks like they have to write it down to zero, which is insane. And I was like, I got some GBTC. I'm like, ooh, what's that gonna do to GBTC? But other than that, before we get into the thick of it, and then how this blew up Celsius and Voyager, what were your thoughts when this was happening? Was it, in your mind, crypto fuckery, or was it just like, oh, these just look like bad actors?
I think it's people just getting ahead of themselves, thinking they're smarter than they are, and the like no due diligence in on the lender side either. Like, what strategy were they presented where it's like, yeah, we'll give you $3 billion? Like, what did somebody tell them? Like, you have some culpability in that too. Like, I know there are, fraud and the like removal of somebody's resources from them through lying, false claims, whatever else is, there's a fine line between audacity and fraud, right? We've talked about this in the context of a bunch of different things on the show before. The WeWork dude. Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is like weirdly a version of that, but less so because you're operating in the same system. It's like these these behemoth crypto funds that you would think would know the ecosystem inside and out are like, oh yeah, these guys must be able to get like 5, 6, 7, 8x return on us because like the guy's being a prick on Twitter and like getting a bunch of likes on his tweets, that's literally the due diligence people are doing. It's like, oh, he's calling loads of people poor on Twitter, so he must be, he must be smart and like have a really good investment strategy. And then you find out Emperor's got no clothes, Tide goes out. It's all like, man, I think a lot of people get lucky on a couple things. And this is maybe it's a Navalism. It's like you have a few lucky runs and then you think you're like, you get on the like pre-mine of Ethereum and then you get into a couple projects and they go 3000x and then you're like, man, I must be the best capital allocator in the world. It's like, no.
And that was everyone with a Robin account, including myself. So I'm not saying I'm any different.
And 2020, right?
In the last 10 years, to be honest, everything we're looking at, we're like, e-commerce is going to grow. Let me buy Shopify stock. 5 years later, oh, wow, I'm such a genius.
You are, Bilal. You are.
You know enough to hurt yourself.
Hurt yourself, exactly.
No, Jack, I love your explanation because if you look at the quote tweets on Jack's thread, and just like anytime anybody's talked about this 3AC thing, even our Brett Harrison, the FTX founder, the president of FTX US, who we had on the pod, he even made a meme about this situation. Let me pull this up. So and the meme is very consistent with Jack's kind of idea that there was zero due diligence on in the side of the lenders, Celsius, Voyager, and Genesis. So I'll wait till that pulls up. But Jack, I think you're 100% correct. That's literally what happened. They're like, nothing they did was sophisticated. So Arthur Hayes, who we did the meme of the week, obviously he's known as Crypto Hayes, has himself a bit of a sordid history in the crypto industry, but also is one of the smartest commentators.
His newsletter is definitely worth a read.
Dude, look at this. Look at Brett Harrison. 3AC founders,
incredible.
Investors, creditors, and spouses. He's got the Spider-Man thing where everybody's pointing at each other. They're all the same, right? It's like nobody did any due diligence on this. So actually, and FTX was caught up in this too because they had invested, I believe, I can't remember if it's Celsius or Voyager, but they also gave a line of credit to one of those banks to try to save it because FTX, they need the crypto industry to thrive, obviously. So it's in their interest to keep, I'm imagining they're doing more due diligence, even though I think they got zeroed on one of those investments. But back to Jack's point, this was not a complicated scheme that these people got caught up in.
Well, remember Bernie Madoff had a Bank of America account. Yeah. That's a good
was
analogy.
$5 billion, right? He had No, exactly. I'm not saying that the 3AC guys were running a Ponzi, but what they were doing was they identified something that was the thing that blew them up was Terra Luna. So Arthur Hayes in a piece 2-3 weeks ago wrote about it. It's like it was not a complicated trade. It was just as Bilal knows, or not Bilal, but Bilal, you had some money in Anchor, right? The Anchor protocol.
No, I actually didn't, but I had it on my list for a long time to try, and the friction was so much that I thankfully didn't. But otherwise, yeah, I would definitely would have.
I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but
good, yeah.
Let's revisit the Terra Luna thing. They had Terra Luna, run by Do Kwon, the founder.
Talking to people who say you're poor to people on the internet.
Exactly. Right?
I miid be conflating some of those, but I know they all have like personalities that are less than, down the middle.
Exactly. He tried, Do Kwon famously tried to bootstrap an algorithmic stable coin. But as we discussed and has been discussed,
listen to that sentence, for fuck's sake.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly, it's true. Bootstrap and algorithmic stablecoin. We've got so used to all these words that you forget how crazy it all sounds.
Sure it is, right? But the trade was pretty simple. So the UST was the Terra ecosystem stablecoin, and basically to drive people into the ecosystem, they gave this incentive in a lending protocol called Anchor. They promised 20%. People 20%. 20%, right? As we discussed in our episode talking about Terra, you can think about it as a marketing expense, right? And it worked clearly to a degree. I believe the market cap for UST stablecoin market cap's the wrong word, but it got up to $40 billion. But the point was 3AC, Three Arrows Capital, saw that this was one of the greatest trades ever because it was a pure Ponzi trade. Everybody in the ecosystem knew it. These smart analytics people were like, this is not going to work, right? The mechanism of UST stablecoin was made to be attacked and for the peg to break, which is what happened. But anyways, these guys at 3AC, I think to Jack's point, the reason people willing to give them money, they're showing these returns, and it's just because they're getting this 20% from Terra UST. But they're levering up. They're borrowing money. This is where it gets a little bit shady, though. They may have been lying to creditors about the state and the type of investments they did, which is similar to...
that's to what Jack was saying earlier about the due diligence. Like, they could have maybe done due diligence and they just broke their promise, essentially. That could be. We don't know if that's the case.
Well, and the parallel in normal finance, trad finance, or traditional finance, as it is called, is Bill Hwang. Bill Hwang from Archegos Capital.
Yeah.
Bill Hwang was doing some similar things in the equities world where he was borrowing money from lenders and not exposing his entire position to them. And he was able to do that because of a financial instrument called a total equity return swap. We don't have to get into that. But
CFA fan coming through. Yeah, love it.
The reason I bring all that up is that there's two parts to this story. There's just the Jack part that I identify is just pure greed, lack of due diligence, no risk management. This is not specific to crypto. The crypto part is that the thing that blew this up was a Terra UST was the trigger, and it was why the two guys at 3AC were confident enough to kind of go out there and be like, yeah, we can just make it happen, guys. It's because they saw this essentially Ponzi offering out there, and they levered it to the moon. But as we all know, when you lever something up, it can juice returns on the way up. But when it unravels, it's game over, right? And that's why I took out Celsius. That's why I took out Voyager. Genesis sounds like they have enough money, more than enough to pay for, but they're taking a $2.8 billion hit. So Jack's thread, the last thing I'll just talk about here is this is where they could be legally liable and where crimes could have been committed, potentially, allegedly, lying about the extent of losses to lenders, lying about leverage and directional market exposure, the movement of the funds, and not disclosing their liquidations to shareholders and creditors. This last one is actually where the yacht comes in. So when Terra UST blew up, a lot of people in the crypto investing space were like, oh, we think 3AC might be very exposed. 3AC said, no, we're good. Our risk management is fully under control here. And the last thing I will add is this. So Crypto Hayes made a point, which I've seen people rebut, but I'll give his point, then I'll throw it to you guys, and I'll give the rebuttal. His point is this. All the DeFi lending protocols involved in all these blowups, like Maker, Aave, Compound, they liquidated as soon as the metrics were hit. It's like, okay.
Because it's a smart contract.
It's a smart contract, right? So they're basically saying, okay, the borrower, if they hit whatever, let's give it an arbitrary metric. Like if their ETH hits below a certain level, or the price of ETH hits level, they're liquidated. No question, right? So the Crypto Haze writes, all the major DeFi lending protocols, most of which I mentioned, they survived. The protocols didn't have to halt withdrawals. The protocols continued to issue loans even after the fuckery happened, and they had to cut some people off. And the protocols did not suffer any downtime. The protocols did what was required of them. And when we talked about with John Woo when he's here, some of these protocols, what makes them inefficient is they require a lot of collateral, right? That's how they work. Like Maker, if you want to mint a DAI, I believe it's like you have to put 2 Bitcoin to get 1 or something equivalent, right? So the protocols work. And Crypto Haze's entire point is like, this is just opaque reputational stuff. It's like what Jack said. These 3AC guys are out there raising money off their reputation, shit talking on Twitter, and even just getting a lot of money because they had a lot of money. It's like, if you had money to deploy, who'd you give it to? It's like, oh, 3AC. These guys are running a $10 billion fund. They could easily take your billion, right? Like that was literally the level of due diligence. So Crypto Haze said, go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to say, just like to add on to the behavioral stuff, like in the middle of the red hot NFT market, like they were getting involved there too. So like buying pieces at crazy valuations, another like, oh, this is going in the 3X.
This is 3AC? 3AC was mine. Oh yeah, that's right.
They got like a real like incredible blue chip NFT collection, just, you know, and it's like, you know, that's just someone in an office somewhere like banging on MetaMask and be like, bang, 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 let's go. Like, I don't think that's going in a strategy presentation anywhere. Yeah. Like, I think people just, You're right. Those are going to be liquidated at it's tiny level. Yeah. They're going to go to auction somewhere, somehow, or lost forever. I don't know. It depends how well they custody them, right? Like, you don't even know if they're accessible at this point. Could be lost forever.
Well, let me leave the last line.
I just want to say one more thing, Trung, about like protocol. Like that distinction is really important and interesting in like the DeFi frame, where it's like, if the rules are written well, like if everybody agrees upon the rules within the system and it does not need a person to function, there's a piece that we need to put in the link. A guy called Jacob Horn, who runs or co-founded a protocol called Zora, which is based on NFTs. He calls these things hyperstructures, which is like you deploy this thing and it just runs forever. It's on the blockchain. It's on the Ethereum blockchain in this case. And the rules in which are embedded in its inception cannot be broken. And because it's a system that's been well designed, like the idea that, you know, under collateralizing something, or like the idea that like an algorithm or this or that is like an ability to make up for human idiocy at scale is like, it's just such a ridiculous like wing and a prayer, right? It's like, but everybody really wants to believe it. You really want to believe like, oh, I can get 20% return on my capital risk-free. That sounds sick. And a lot of people, a lot of sophisticated people signed up for that shit.
Yeah, and when you're looking at the Trung's laughing because he's looking at me, but no, no. The thing is, that especially in that crazy time where 20% was like conservative, right? Like 5%, 6% staking ETH was conservative.
I know.
You were doing. Like,
yeah. Sorry, Bilal, go.
No, I was just saying there were people obviously getting hundreds and thousands of percent, which obviously is ridiculous. Like I knew that from the beginning. I will say, I mean, we talked about this on the pod many times, that kind of like series of questions that I always ask when I would look at these things. It was like, where's the money coming from? Is it just them printing tokens of a token that is going to be worthless because there's, you know, unlimited tokens being printed? Or is it a marketing expense, like you said? Is it like a bonus for being early, which is the case sometimes, right? So it just comes down to like, that's even very basic due diligence, and I don't do this for a living, right? So luckily, yeah, I mean, I wasn't in Anchor probably by chance and luck in this case, but like when we did that episode, I know multiple people who had millions of dollars in it. And also, I mean, massive, like, what's his name, Mike Novogratz, my man has the tattoo on his side forever.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, is like, you assume that these people are like, that's your due diligence. Your due diligence is like people who have dedicated 30 years of their life studying this infrastructure have made a colossal bet on their reputation, their firm, their funds, everything. And like, man, they're way more sophisticated than me. So I better jump in on that. And the irony is like the heat that like NFTs get versus that is, in my mind, bizarre. Like Pokemon cards in a playground is more of a legitimate like commercial venture than 3 Arrows Capital. You know, like
someone clipped that one, mate. Someone clipped that.
I got this Charizard. I picked it out of a packet, and you know, there's only X number of them in the world. There's no other one in the school. Who's got the most pocket money? That's it. And then the next person has to hold on to that till someone saves up enough to take that off them again. And I think like all of this stuff is like obfuscation, and having a marketing background, I think lets you see this in a bit of a different way, where it's like people raise money off pitch decks. This happens every day. Thousands and thousands of people have like conjured up the image of something that doesn't exist to take money off somebody else to try and build it. Like this is capitalism 101. And like when markets running red hot and people are paying $10 million for a picture of a monkey, everyone's like, oh, you know, 30% sounds pretty reasonable. 80% sounds pretty reasonable. And it was like, we just blew so far past, like, now I think Michael Saylor's laws of physics come into play a little bit here, where it's like the accounts must be balanced at a certain point, and they happen very, very violently in a short period of time. That was just a huge domino effect. And if the DeFi infrastructure that you talked about didn't exist, I think it would take way longer for even the crypto meme to begin to recover. And NFTs, I think, help keep that boat afloat a little bit. Like there's still a bunch of stuff that still functions. All the exchanges still work, blah, blah, blah. It's not like this is just individuals that took on too much risk and like committed potentially, allegedly, you know,
fraud or like something of that nature. If it's, And what I was just going to say, boys, I mean, the parallel I would draw here is like you were talking about smart people, lots of money under management. You know, I don't know if these people went into this thinking, oh, we're going to like fraud out a bunch of people. They probably, you know, are legit people in their own way, but things turned for the worse at some point. I mean, we've lived through Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, etc. in 2008 or whenever, 2007, I forgot. And like that all collapsed, right? You know, one of the biggest banks in the world collapsed based on not exactly the same thing, but people essentially getting ahead of themselves, right? Like a broken asset. In that case, it was these stupid mortgages, right? And like building on top of it. And then when things come down, everything collapses. So I do understand, you know, why for a long time the criticism for people who don't know enough about all the nuance of crypto have said, oh, it just seems like a pyramid scheme. It seems like
this is not specific, right? That
exactly,
100%
exactly.
agree with you.
And I think, Trung, to your point earlier, that Arthur Hayes talked about, or was it about essentially DeFi, those major blue chip platforms anyway, Aave, Compound, etc. They've actually, you know, stood the test here, and they've actually performed as designed, which is actually a very positive thing, which maybe has gone kind of underreported. All right, who's got this meme up? Who's this? Trunk or Jack?
So I pulled the margin call meme up here. You know, where Kevin Spacey's in the boardroom and he goes, you're selling something you know has no value. Like this is the day before they realize the risk exposure they have and knows like shit's going to hit the fan. The guy responds, we are selling to willing buyers at the current fair market price. And I think this is like to the point about the protocols and the things that have been built that actually enable new things to happen. They are inherently valuable, but they don't have the like, they're not memeable. There's no meme in that thing. There's not like a face on that that's like making outrageous comments on Twitter and calling people idiots. And, you know, there's like, I don't know. I think we try and escape that stuff and talk about the idea of like crypto being immune to manipulation, but everything is a transaction between people at a certain point, and then like the, you know, the network effects, the meme spreading is just I think just creates volatility in every direction, in markets, in relationships, in all of these different. It's just very, very. Were we talking about? Oh no, that's the Balaji thing. Like make a constant a variable. Do you remember? Was that on Tim Ferriss?
Yeah. He's talking about. He was talking about how, if I remember correctly, like two things that before were like binary are now,
yes.
There's like a sliding scale. I think he used like, I don't want to bring up this can of worms, but like gender 20 years ago or 30 years ago was more binary, and now there's more sliding scale or whatever. And he used a few other examples like that as well.
Yeah, and I think people who are like of age to be gambling in crypto or to, be allocating capital in crypto probably grew up
nice
in a world where
rebrand there, mate. Yeah.
those
guys,
variables.
check out this. Wait, can one of you guys read that?
The ironic thing is this is probably one of the most sound investments in the whole portfolio.
Can one of you guys read what it is?
Than the entire Terra Luna.
Okay, hold on.
Business.
For the listeners,
people are listening. Go on, Jack.
There's a tweet of an NFT from Jack Nywald, who we talked about the thread, and this goes to everything that Jack and Bilal just talked about. Specifically, Jack talking about how the investment team at 3AC was literally just some dude on MetaMask clicking a screen. The image on the screen is of an NFT of crypto.
Sorry, it's so good.
Crypto dick butt 1462. Estimated value 1,400.
But
so Jack wasn't even joking. Earlier, Jack said there is somebody on the 3AC, Three Arrows Capital Investment team, just hitting random buttons on MetaMask. There's proof of that.
Probably listening to this podcast. Probably listening to this podcast right now.
But you know what's crazy is that specific NFT now is going to be worth 50 times what it was because of its involvement in this.
Oh, 100%. Imagine owning the one. Oh my God, that's so true.
We're so early. We're so early, boys. We're so early.
The meta strategy is buying distressed assets that are caught up in these big fraudulent blow-ups. So keep your eye out for those.
It's like real estate on auction.
You need to tease that out. You buy fraudulent NFTs from big high-profile hedge funds.
Well, no, the NFTs aren't fraudulent. The NFTs that are caught up in these fraudulent behaviors and therefore get memed into
it's like buying something from the Silk Road. If there were NFTs on the Silk Road back in the day, if you could put that up on your digital wall frame or whatever,
somebody's going to buy that thing. All of those things are probably interesting. It'd be interesting to see, because if they do auction them off, it'll be interesting to come back and see, like, did they make like market premium? Because in a non-digital market, it wouldn't be as interesting, right? It's because like having that and being able to flex that you bought that on Twitter, like I've got the three-act crypto dick butt is like a claim to fame. And
well, add that to lines we never thought we'd hear in a podcast ever.
Well, or in a sentence. That one's right behind bootstrapping an algorithmic stablecoin. Said with a completely straight face, assuming everyone on this listener that killed me.
Right, and that's So I think that's the amazing contrast that we can tease out here is like the crypto dick butt project ended up being a much stronger store of value than the bootstrapped algorithmic stablecoin that the most sophisticated investors in the world invested in, and everybody laughed at the former.
Said in a room bought by many of those NFTs as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Not investment advice, but yeah.
Man, we couldn't have gotten into this with Saylor because we wouldn't have got the time, but there's a couple of amazing threads that people have written recently, and they just sound like complete crackpot theories, right? They sound nuts, but it's like, this is how you can see how unique things absorb value, because we collectively assign attention to these things and they just hold relevance for such a long time that there's a version of the world that I can see playing out where it's like a huge amount of capital and attention. I mean, it already is the case with non-networked art, right? People who have obscene sums of money buy Monets and all of these other things. And now you have like things that are truly integrated in culture in real time that become relevant, that Man, it's an interesting time to be alive, boys. But
yeah, you definitely might get a bit more interesting soon.
It's all good, like burning the floor of the forest. I think all of these things are like, you know, you clear out the junk and then you get back, and we'll have some more idiocy to talk about, I'm sure, in a few weeks. It's not going to stop.
That's exactly what Crypto Hayes says. If you look at this in the long view, again, not saying his word is the Bible, but an interesting thinker on it. And the last line he had in his essay about 3AC was, when you remove trust from the equation and rely purely on transparent lending standards executed by impartial computer code, you get a better outcome. This is the lesson to be learned, he says, from this entire experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And yeah, I think greed was never going away, and like persuasion is never going away. So that's what these
Crypto
are the
dick butt 1429 is never going away.
Correct.
Oh,
SVG, it's a SVG image data stored on chain, boys. So short of an asteroid hitting Earth, that shit is here forever.
Oh boy, for the new people here, you got to go back to listen to some of these old ones to get all these references.
Unfortunately, most of the new people listening are probably Bitcoin enthusiasts. They're probably not too impressed by the
they probably stopped
the
listening
diagnosis.
at minute 15.
That's true. All right,
I doubt they got to the mention of dick butts. Yeah,
but yeah, let's get on to the next topic then. So that's the edge of the internet stuff out the way, boys. Let's get on to some tech. We got a couple big tech things going on. We're going to talk about TikTok, Instagram eating into Google search, and Amazon private label. If we get to that in a second, we got some more stuff coming. So this is just a very quick thing that you guys might have seen. I'll read this tweet out from someone who said, almost 40% of young people, when they're looking for a place for lunch, don't go to Google Maps or search. They go to TikTok or Instagram. And this was a quote from SVP of Google. I have confirmation from a few people that I've spoken to at Google to dig into this a little bit more, that this is like a very big thing within the company, that they are looking at, like when I was there, 2010 to 2017, early on, they're like, Bing is trying to take up some of our share. And then later it was like Amazon, and then it was Facebook, obviously. And interestingly, with TikTok, you wouldn't necessarily straight away think about it being a direct competitor to search, but it really is. And so we're going to talk about like visual search in a second, and why people are using that. But also, if you think about YouTube specifically, like, you know how bullish all of us are, especially me, on YouTube. And I've talked a lot about YouTube being the second largest search engine in the world. And I even caught myself doing this a few days ago. I've got a bit of a bad knee right now playing tennis, and I went on YouTube and typed in like how to check my knee, whatever, and I looked at the numbers. It was like 4 minutes, 15 minutes, 12 minutes. I was like, I want the 1 minute version with a little tune playing in the background to keep it snappy. And I went on TikTok, and honestly, like, I found 3-4 results that were probably as good, if not better, than YouTube in that case.
What do you think about YouTube Shorts, Bilal?
I mean, I think they're all right. Well, you mean as a consumer, like someone watching them, or as someone who has a YouTube channel?
Them going head to head with TikTok. I'm curious.
Oh, I think it's hard to go. I mean, I think similar to Reels on Instagram, they're getting kind of like artificially pumped a bit more right now because they're trying to play catch up on TikTok. I think it's good to have, like, for the consumer. Like, clearly there's already people using vertical video with these short things, but really people are just creating TikToks and putting them as YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels most of the time anyway. You even see it says like they've downloaded it from a TikTok. I don't know much more about it. I think they're interesting. Like, I used to be very against vertical video for a long time. Like, I was like, why are people creating vertical videos and whatever? But now, like, I've seen some creators like really making some cool content. It just looks natively beautiful on the screen, and they've made it for mobile. So I'd say for that reason, maybe there'll be people that come up with interesting stuff around that. I just see it kind of how Instagram copied Snapchat with stories, like now they copy them with Reels. Shorts feel very similar to both of Shorts and Reels feel very similar to TikTok.
I guess the one closer parallel they have is the search engine DNA, though, right? versus like Instagram or Snapchat as a resource to find instructions or like some.
Yeah,
that
you mean like they've just got
closer.
this big database, like people are already going to that.
Like
for that
YouTube
reason?
can feed you the content you're looking better than Instagram.
Yeah, it feels like they have like a better shot than the like Instagram just feels like, man, this is you don't have the like behavioral thing. Like people are like
for search, you mean?
Yeah.
But that's what's interesting though is for certain types of searches, they're finding young people are doing it. So the ones that are really standing out is obviously visual search. So it's not like Google Lens or whatever where you're using your camera to find something. It's you're like I've seen people do this where they're traveling and they're like, okay, where do I want to visit in Mexico City? I'm going to go to the tag for places on Mexico City. And I don't do this that much, but a lot of people do, and a lot of younger people especially, they're natively like, oh yeah, of course I go to the tag and I'm going to see the top videos, the top restaurants and the things that look cool to me.
We're instead of seeing boys.
Yeah, we are getting old for sure.
It's crazy though. TikTok is just, I mean, they're eating everyone's lunch, right?
And
like, well, I want to say that Meta, so Zuckerberg, to your point about Reels, Bilal, he literally pivoted the entire company to Reels. It's like Reels first. It's when you make an Instagram video, it's going to kind of go Reels first. They're feeding it into the Facebook newsfeed. And it's actually insane because he's taking Facebook away from its social graph, like the entire basis of their business. And Zuckerberg, we've talked in the past about how you need like this founder energy to pivot an entire company. But he made the announcement. He's like, yeah, we're becoming a recommendation first company. We're relying on an ML algo, which if you actually think about it is insane because they built nearly $1 trillion business on the social
graph. And now it's transitioned to like interest graph,
just like,
right?
whatever,
network state. It's a network state, boys. You're no longer like paired up with the people you grow up next to, or like it's way more.
You're paired up with interest.
Like, if you think of Facebook, that's a really good like frame for it. Like if you think of Facebook, literally started with networks of university, college students, and schools, all right, and then it went to like, oh, now I'm going to add everyone I know from my hometown, even though I've moved to somewhere. But
people like me.
Gemma had a baby. Oh, cool. Nice, cute baby, whatever. And then it's like parents come on it. And then you're like, oh, man, now I can't post the same stuff that I posted at university or whatever. Then there's a cool thing, Instagram. And then you go from half friends to half interests and influencers and brands, basically. And now you've gone straight up to TikTok, which is, I don't even see half the people I follow. It's just it's the For You page. It's like, what's good today? I do not
use TikTok. I am so legitimately afraid of it. I'm so addicted to so many things already. I just cannot add another 45 minutes. But I want to throw one thing out there while you guys were talking about whether or not Reels or Shorts can compete. So I agree with Jack that the YouTube angle, the YouTube search angle is huge for Shorts, right? Like they have that in their DNA. They can feed people what they want. But the main thing that people really need to understand about TikTok is the way it's built. This is the reason why it's so good and why it's the perfect recommendation algo and why Reels and Shorts may struggle. So for the listeners, I'm going to describe two mobile phone screens. On the left is Twitter and on the right is TikTok's For You page or just a video, right? So you guys talked about it. Let's talk about TikTok's, how it feeds you content. So this is all, the philosophy is explained by Eugene Wei, product manager, former early employee at Hulu, Amazon, really smart dude. He's saying, if you look at TikTok, Bilal, what do you see on a TikTok screen? You get one video, right? You get a single video.
Yeah, I think it's like there's basically at the top, there's For You page and then following or something.
No, but
it's just
the
one
piece
video.
Of content. Yeah. So
it's
you get a single piece of content. Yeah. So what does that do? Eugene says that it's an algorithmic friendly design. So if you're developing an algorithm, you would want as many signals as possible that are high value, right? So in a TikTok video, if you want to know whether or not somebody likes that content, you know that they're only looking at that one thing. Right?
Oh, that's a great point.
Smart.
Yeah, never thought. Because on the left-hand side, there's 2-3 pieces of content. Well, if someone went off the app, you're like, did they not like the first tweet or did they not like the second tweet? Did they not like the things at the top or, or the ad?
I was talking about the Twitter feed here for the listeners. So when you're looking at Twitter, it's not a single piece of content, right? There's probably 3 or 4 tweets at one time. And like you can indicate your interest by liking, retweeting, and commenting. but it's just not everything there is a high signal. Like are you scrolling fast or are you scrolling slow? Like that's probably not built into the Twitter recommendation algorithm as tightly and as smartly as it is for TikTok. Whereas every single thing on TikTok is, what is a song? How long are you watching it? Where are your eyes looking? They can freaking track your eye movements, commenting, liking. It's 100% on that single piece of content. So you're training the algorithm for TikTok perfectly, right? So this is the reason I bring this up is you guys are talking about, is it copyable, XYZ? The reality is that like TikTok's like algorithm, it is very ingeniously built. It is copyable, but Instagram is a monstrosity. It's a Frankenstein. Every time Facebook's want to launch a new thing, they just jam it into Instagram, right?
Yeah, they recently, I think they shipped an update that like locks the content in the screen on each.
Oh, that's like on Reels, though, I think, or when you're watching like a vertical video.
On tiles, on image tiles. Maybe it's only rolled out to some people, but I've seen it. It's like
they're upping. They need to up the reco game.
Yeah, they're trying to exactly get that.
That's interesting. Going.
And the Reels, like, I mean, there's good stuff on those Reels. Like, I'm the same as you, Tron. I'm like, this stuff is just like sucking my brain in. But I need to learn how to produce some of that stuff.
I would say that honestly,
Instagram's killing me right now, boys.
And for what you guys do, especially like for what we all do, but especially like what you guys do, I was like that for ages on TikTok where I was like, oh, I can't have another thing I'm sucked into. But I just had to kind of give in and be like, let me just authentically be like, what do I actually find more interesting? And then once I start using it, it definitely is taking time away from where I would spend time on YouTube. I still watch YouTube a lot, but it's definitely taking time from there and Instagram. And honestly, it's just like the mood of it is generally pretty fun. It's like upbeat, so you leave feeling mostly good. Whereas like on Twitter, I used to love Twitter, but like during the pandemic, I liked it. But now I'm like, oh, half the stuff is these annoying threads which are like, there are 7 billion people in the world, this is how to but they don't breathe air very well, and like this is how you should breathe 7 things, and I'm like, what, how? Like, I get why they're getting shared, but like I don't want that on my feed. It's like very poor content. So
let me actually show you something to Bilal's point. I love the explanation there, but this also speaks to why Twitter is such an underperforming ad platform. So this is from Ben Thompson's newsletter that we always talk about. But I love this meme so much. Yeah. So for the listeners, it's that meme of a guy that's playing a video game. It's him relaxed, and then him, like, you know, when you lean forward playing a game, you're getting serious, you're trying to win. But his whole point is, when you're on Instagram and TikTok, you're enjoying life, right? It's like Bilal said, it's enjoyable. When you're on Twitter, you're waiting to get triggered. You're waiting for somebody to offend you, right? Like, you're waiting for somebody to say something stupid so you can pounce on it. So you're leaning in. It's a really intense experience. It's not like I'm not trying to buy a DTC product when I'm arguing about somebody about politics, right? So I think that was a really smart thing that he explained about why these ad platforms are so different. And TikTok is a monster. $12 billion a year already.
I mean, I got an interesting anecdotal thing, like, because Visualize Value is like primarily education products. Twitter is by far the highest converting platform, but doing stuff on Instagram, like, you're right, like the mentality of people like casually scrolling lends itself way better to like, oh, that's a cool hat, I want to buy that hat, right? It's not like, hey, let me think about my future and how I want to invest in my education and purchase this thing. Like, they'll skip over that. So it is interesting that you're on the same screen, but the environment and the context is just, even if you're putting the same content on the different platforms, it's like what you're wedged between is so different.
It's like why you're going to the app in the first place, right? And also it comes down to like the motivation for following your account. Like on Instagram, it's normally like someone probably shared it on their story, or like, you know, in the DMs is like, oh, this is a cool thing or whatever, and they're like, oh, that's cool, I'm going to just add that to I'm going to follow that, and the visuals are like really cool. Whereas on Twitter, I feel like people have almost got to know you more as well. Also, the audience that is really active on Twitter that I've got a big following in are like early adopter tech types, which is not like when you go onto Twitter and you're one of those people, you are someone who's generally like, you know, trying to learn something. You're like interested in the latest, what's going on in the industry, whatever. Whereas if you were, let's say, a political pundit, right? Like that also thrives on Twitter and Instagram in its own way. But there's a different motivation for someone following you. You know what I mean? And I was going to say the TikTok thing, just to close it out. Obviously, my opinion of Twitter and how TikTok and the kind of feeling I get on there is based on my feed. So I'm assuming a lot of people's is similar and just like reading about it. But I'm sure, you know, it's kind of grown so much that there are people like that I had to kind of like hide, where I'm like, I don't want this negativity on my feed right now. It's too much. I already get enough of that everywhere else. But it's like people, you know, basically essentially like complaining or like, you know, talking about stuff that's going on in the world. And I'm like, man, I don't need this right now. But for someone else, that's what they like, and they're like double clicking on it, and then they get more of that stuff, and they might have a completely different opinion because TikTok is showing them a bunch of those things. I don't know if that's true, but I'm assuming, you know, they're just getting more of what they like. So what I like is pretty positive stuff that's funny and interesting, stuff like that, and I'm getting more of that. But so it's kind of a reflection of who you are as well, without getting too deep. Like if you kind of attract like what you want, if you follow who you follow, if you're following the New York Times and like you know, just news channels where they're talking about what's going on in the world, you're going to get a bunch more of that sort of stuff. So
Bilal, hold on, I want to add to that, to what you started with, is that's actually why Gen Z is preferring TikTok for searches, right? It's in the thread that we mentioned from my boy Tommy Clark. He said that TikTok to them is more trustworthy because you know the deal. When you go on Google now, you search something, what are the first 5 search results? They're ads.
Oh, ads.
Or Google properties, right? It's like Google.
Like the Google suggested result, like you can game your way into that too. Where it's like, go and like search, like, should I buy Bitcoin? There'll be something like, yeah, you definitely should. It's going to $500,000 by 2025. It's like, you just read that, and like people who, I don't know, who grew up natively with the internet. This is like the difference of your parents' understanding of the internet and people who understand that people can game the internet, if that makes sense. Yeah, look at this. This is a great visual.
This is from Tommy Clark. Tommy Clark.
Oh, yeah. This is great.
It's great, right? So
could you explain it for people only listening? Yeah.
Yeah, so listeners, Tommy Clark put 2 visuals here. He showed what the Google search result page looks like, which we all know. And then the right-hand side is the TikTok search results. And his point is, first of all, TikTok right now doesn't have ads, or they're not being pushed to the top for the search results. That's probably going to change. But the point is, which one is more appealing, right? TikTok has proven that these stupid thumbnails that we've all laughed about for YouTube and TikTok, that's what drives people. People are social animals. People want to see faces. People want to see visuals. Like, look at that. That's crazy, right?
Empty restaurant in the Google is so perfect. Like
that's a great comparison.
Yeah, they have an
and
empty
it's an
restaurant.
ad too from the infatuation. It's pretty funny.
Exactly.
And so
they need to hire you, mate.
Well, I was talking to someone about it, like, so what I will say on the flip side, the case for Google having a chance at, you know, regaining some of these.
Hold on, disclaimer. Bilal was a former Google employee.
And hold stock.
No, hardly. Yeah. Also, I would love to call out the person who said the guy on the top right clearly owns a bunch of Ethereum and something like that. I'm like, I wish I did. Not after this last 6 months. But anyway, but yeah. So what I was saying is, you know, there's only, you know, Google is this wide in terms of search, right? Like different categories. There's retail, travel, finance. Like there's so many categories. Now the sort of queries that are actually being taken here are what are called, without getting to like academic, there's like navigational, basically like research for local stuff, right? That's and the kind of visual search is dominating in that way. And but that is like using visual search. So that visual search is both the results you're seeing is visual, but also like we're also creating a bunch of content that is visual too. So who is in a position to index all the world's images and videos better than Google? Probably no one. So they do have an advantage there, except a lot of the content is, let's say, on TikTok or Instagram where they can't index a lot of that stuff. But there are things like, this is one of the stats one of them told me. He said 2 billion screenshots are taken every day. 2 billion screenshots, right? And if of like
Google
just
or in general?
Just in general, like people take that many screenshots, and if you just think of that, sounds so like, oh, that's a bit of a random thing, like who cares about screenshots? If you just think of like how much information is on a screenshot, and basically like there's basically a billion people using like Google Photos and stuff to back up their photos on Android and all these different things. We don't think about it in the US because it's not as prominent, but there's a billion people using that. There's a billion people using maps, you know, etc., etc. So if you add all these things together, there's a bunch of things that they can do in a smart way using visual search. My problem with it is that's not where people are spending the time. The reason they're going to TikTok and Instagram is because they're used to seeing food videos of their favorite influencers sharing they went down to the local restaurant or whatever, or they went to travel in Italy and they're like, oh, you 5 things to see in, you know, on the Italian coast or whatever. So to me, it's like that is been the problem for Google for a while, right? Like since what was it called, Google Plus days, right? It was cool. It was like internal code name I was unnecessarily going to say now, but there was this thing for ages where we would talk about like, oh, they're going to create this social network, they're going to compete, and I just never thought Google has it in their DNA to do stuff that is like people centric. Facebook did. Now obviously Snapchat, point. Right? They're like algorithmic, you know, geniuses with like taking data in and being able to pass it out. And even though we complain about the Google search results, we still all use it because it's still the best.
Yeah, it's still
right.
First
still,
stop.
It's very difficult to do the level of things they're doing. And so the kind of summary is, I do think they have a chance with taking YouTube, taking the shorts, all those things, and gaining some of that back. But I don't think this is reversing. Like, I think people's behavior has changed, and like people using these platforms, and we're only looking at TikTok in today's form. We don't know what TikTok's going to look like in 5 years. TikTok, sorry. Right? If it becomes like a WeChat thing where they've got all these different verticals, which is what people think might happen, is like game over for a huge category of searches.
TikTok should be banned. It should be banned from the United States. You know what I'm saying straight up.
Here we go. Clip. That's a great clip.
I had to do it. It has to be banned. It's way too powerful. My last thought on this is everything we talked about. People spend more time on TikTok than any Facebook, all the Facebook properties combined. It's like, it's way too powerful. After everything we talked about, I already knew it had to be banned. I'm more convinced than ever. And it's just culturally.
Wants Google Maps listings only.
It can't. No, it can't, man. We just cannot have the CCP.
Is this a geopolitical comment, Trung, or is this regardless of the origin of the app?
It's a geopolitical comment.
Interesting.
And this is the analogy. The United
it's
States never.
YouTube.
Yeah, the United States never would have allowed the Soviet party from whatever, the USSR to own ABC, NBC, or CBS. And that's effectively what's going on here. Literally, if you think about how much culture that TikTok is driving, it's leading to #1 best-selling books. It got all those people into Minions. It's the most important engine for music. This is in the West. TikTok is driving culture. It's owned by a Chinese company that has the CCP on its board. It has to be banned. In the
I great points. The only devil's advocate comment I would have is the analogy isn't perfect because they're not doing the programming, but they do influence. They don't create.
They're choosing
content.
What you see, though.
Correct.
So you're right. There is a nuance, but
it is. Yeah. It's not one for one, but it's close. Yeah.
The only way this can survive, and people are going to hate to hear this, but Donald Trump was right. He did it for the wrong reasons, but what he did was politically correct, was to ban it, or to try to ban it. He didn't. The reason he did it poorly is because A, he's Donald Trump and couldn't get it through, and B, it has to be more than an executive order. It needs to be legislation. So ban it or give it entirely to whatever. I don't care. Let Oracle and Walmart own it. It cannot be owned by ByteDance.
What actually happened? What was the summary of the punchline to all that when it happened?
He lost the election, and Biden never followed through with it.
Got it.
But a lot of people in the administration have come in. It's not even a lot of people. The view from both sides, in Democrats and Republicans, is they view China as a real threat now, more so than in 2015 before Trump. And it is an issue. It is still an issue. People are still talking about it. BuzzFeed had that huge leak of how China is still accessing U.S. data. I just think it's a no-brainer when you think about the amount of influence it has, that it just can't be in the hands of a strategic rival.
Yeah.
Fair.
Fair enough.
I was just gonna try and tie one point back to our original discussion, which is YouTube does have the luxury of like Google, not so much. Like Generation Z has strong connections with people who produce content on YouTube. Fair? Is that a fair comment? Yeah. Like longer form stuff?
Like Mr. Beast.
Right.
Say that again, because I just started laughing when we said Generation Z. Sounded so boomer there. You like Generation Z. I was like, this guy was born in the 1900s.
After millennials and
Zoomers. Sorry, could you say it again? So Gen
basically,
Z,
I'm saying the YouTube meme is stronger with Gen Z than the Google meme.
For sure, yeah.
So I'm saying they live on
YouTube, yeah.
There's an opportunity there. Like maybe 100%. The analogy is like that's their TV. You know, I know TikTok is playing some of that role, but like someone's going to watch a 5-minute clip or 10-minute highlights from a podcast. That's like the equivalent of watching, you know, an hour-long special on TV, probably for some people.
You're right. No, I think, and also just if you think of like TV is one, but it's almost like more than TV. It's like becoming part radio, like equivalent of part radio in the past. When you think longer term of people listening in the background and stuff, if that fully happens, like, you know, so yeah, I 100% agree by far. And also kind of like a career, like if the number one thing when we were kids, you'd ask kids what they want to be, they'd say like an astronaut. The number one thing now is I want to be a YouTuber, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that is the reality of.
I think it's phenomenal, Bilal.
Yeah, fair enough. I probably do agree on that side anyway. All right, boys, we got that's true.
We don't need to talk Amazon. I'm good with this.
All right, so we cut that, because I think
let me give a little secret sauce for the listeners. We often write what the headline for the podcast or YouTube's going to be, and I already did that. We don't need that anymore.
Oh, nice.
That's the way. That's the way.
No characters for it.
I think we already hit an hour and a half. I think so. I think this is a good time.
Oh, that's a good title, Trung. That's gonna hit some searches. Yeah. We need to chop this up and get it on TikTok, Trung.
Or we just change it to. Should we just change? So for the listeners, I just typed to the boys BTC versus ETH, 3AC blow up, TikTok secret sauce. But I'm actually thinking we should change it to just ban TikTok, capital letter.
Yeah.
Well,
TikTok
that's the
should be
thumbnail.
banned as a clip for sure. With you
this
screaming.
Is the inside baseball or whatever it's called. That you're gonna see the thumbnail now that Jack's gonna conjure up.
Mate, I think we need to. I think I need to up the thumbnails from the gridded 3 piece, and I need to get them. I need to start cutting people's faces out.
No, let's do it. Let's go for YouTube with the text, and I think we
Bitcoin influencer.
I will say, like, just for if anyone's still listening, like the Saylor episode is the first time that we used text in the thumbnail, and it's not the only reason. Obviously, like it's Michael Saylor, whatever, but like genuinely, like that stuff makes a big difference. And I look at the click-through rates because I'm sending you guys that number on a daily basis. So, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, we should definitely. It's quite fun, like experimenting with it. Yeah, we'll try it out. We'll see how it goes.
One face, I bet is gonna really help the thing.
Yeah, because our thumbnail is normally us 3, and it's kind of small. Like, really, we should have a bigger one of us.
Totally.
We'll figure it out.
We are not optimizing. They're amazing thumbnails. They're just not optimized for YouTube.
Boys, you need to get your Elgato green screens out.
That's true. I think we need to do that. Yeah,
we need to do that, and then we can pull some very good reactions and get some nice little layers in behind them without too much production. Thank you, Elgato.
Thank you, Elgato.
Hey, thank you, Elgato. I will say your camera's been messing up on me, so I don't want to shill it too much, because the camera. You see me in the middle of this recording. I had to turn it off and turn it back on because I'm having some issues, but it's all right. Just so you know, I keep it real. Even when people send stuff free, we gotta keep it real, mate. When we have an issue. I don't want someone spending money on it and then having that issue. I didn't say, but overall, good piece of kit. All right, this was another episode of Not Investment Advice. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all your support. Last week, you guys blew it out the park and really, came through, liked and subscribed on the YouTube and commented and everything. I will say, make sure you put the comments on YouTube. I know 40-50 people every time will write stuff in Telegram, which is amazing. We love it there too, but just copy and paste it over, because it gives nice little boost, but also gets the conversation going there, and that's where we want to build, is on YouTube as well. So thanks for your support, and we will see you next week. Cheers.